Thank you, Mr President. I rise to speak about wage theft. Yesterday, Adelaide citizens were horrified to see an incident in Gouger Street in our capital city of a young woman who simply demanded a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. It is understood that she had been working trial shifts at a bubble tea shop called Fun Tea, and it was not so fun for her when she asked for her fair day's pay to be slapped on the face and kicked in the stomach, to require ambulance attention and indeed hospital attention for simply asking for a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. This young woman, I have to commend her courage and her bravery. She stood up against something that is rife in the South Australian community, something that has rightly shocked the South Australian community. She stood up against wage theft. Unfortunately, through my work and the Honourable Madam Acting President, I know full well your fine work in this area, through our committee's work on wage theft, we know that her story is not a unique one. We know that somewhere between 1/3 and 1/4, particularly of international students, these most vulnerable of workers, are being exploited here in Adelaide. We also know, much to the disgrace of the Marshall government, that not much is being done about it. Indeed, less than nothing is being done about it when the very service, the Young Workers Legal Service, who was actually intervening for these international students in particular, has had its funding cut in the last year by SafeWork SA. Indeed, $150,000 to that Young Workers Legal Service went a long way in ensuring those international students, those young people on visas who have been made even more vulnerable than ever by the COVID pandemic, were able to actually get a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. It is unacceptable that in South Australia, in Adelaide, that we see a young woman such as this, not an individual aberration, but indeed an endemic statistic. And we see the Marshall government look away from these young people who are entrusted to our country by their families, believing that we have a safe society for them to work in, not just safely, but indeed with dignity and respect, and a wage that is accorded and appropriate to their work. And yet they have been abandoned by our government with the cuts to the Young Workers Legal Service and with the abrogation of the duties of SafeWork SA, indeed, to act on these matters. It was extraordinary to hear the Treasurer today say that SafeWork SA took some calls from my office yesterday, which indeed is the case, but to say that that was the first that they heard of it was not what they told my staff member, that's for sure. But for SafeWork SA to need a call from my office to act on wage theft and endemic exploitation of international students in Adelaide is indeed a far cry from what most South Australians would expect from a fair government, and indeed what those families of these students and these students themselves should be expecting as fair and appropriate treatment when they work, live, study and play in our country. We believe that we are a welcoming society. We benefit from the export of the export education sector. We absolutely benefit from the diversity of cultures that we enjoy as a result of having international students and new arrivals in our city. We should be supporting them to be able to access the full protections of the law. We know that language and cultural barriers are standing in the way, and we also know that those barriers really are exploited by the very criminals that wage theft should be properly addressed, and ensuring that we are taking wage theft seriously as a crime will be an incredibly important step to stopping these people who exploit these young, vulnerable young people in our state from further duress, harm and indeed, in this case, physical injury. Thank you.